Anime is an adventure, and like any adventure, if you keep an open mind, there will be endless worlds of wonder to discover. On my journey to completing 1,000 anime, I've discovered that for me, watching anime is not about religiously watching just a single genre because that would get old. It's also not about pedantically analyzing every anime with a fine-tooth comb in order to discover a modicum of factoids to extrapolate from because that would get boring too. I enjoy anime the most when I'm not exclusively chasing down series that deserve either a 9 or a 10, which is why I quit scoring my reviews. I believe that the content of the review is enough to allow someone to decide if the anime is right for them, because there are some people out there who will disregard a show for only being a 7 or an 8, but these anime can often have underlying beauty of their own. Of course, they're not perfect, but they can be enjoyable for just the right person. The Vision of Escaflowne is just that type of anime. It goes without saying that it's not perfect, but it definitely is something that will catch your attention and keep you invested up until the very end if you're a big fan of fantasy. What I enjoyed the most was the universe that the story takes place in. It really feels like a well thought out and greatly detailed environment. Here we visit the world of Gaia, a mystical world inhabited by at least 11 different races spread across many different kingdoms, both at peace and at war. And when I say war, I don't mean with bows and arrows or swords and magic like traditional fantasy, I mean with giant suits of armor called Gaimelas. As for the environment, some of the more prominent of Gaia's kingdoms are Fenalia, lying deep within a valley surrounded by wild dragons and inhabited by both townspeople and farmers alike. Their prized possession is an ancient suit of armor named Escaflowne. Fenalia's neighboring kingdom, Asturia, is a relatively new merchant kingdom that has already become an economic world power. To the north, the Empire of Zybok, once on verge of total destruction, now under the guidance of their new emperor Dorne, have become an industrial powerhouse and the technological leader of the world, with their sights set on conquering all of Gaia. In addition to the various kingdoms, Gaia is home to numerous wonders of past civilizations waiting to be discovered once again. The story of Escaflowne follows several main characters along with an expansive list of side characters who mostly are worth their screen time. Primarily, the story follows Hitomi, a Japanese schoolgirl in love with her track leader and senpai, and yeah, you know what's coming next. Japanese student plus fantasy environment. If you guessed that this was going to be one of the many Spirited Away anime tropes, you're damn right. Hitomi has an unusual ability to predict the future through visions and tarot card readings, which initially confuse her by giving her sights of another world. As Hitomi is about to make moves on her senpai by first showing off her amazing skills of putting one foot in front of the other faster than the average person, she's cock-blocked by a traveler from another world as Vaughn teleports directly into her path while fighting a dragon. Vaughn is the hot-headed Prince of Fenalia who's reluctantly set off to slay a dragon in order to become the next king of Fenalia when he's mysteriously teleported to Earth, where he meets Hitomi and continues the fight. After Vaughn's victory, thanks to Hitomi's special ability to predict the future, he's teleported back to Gaia in just as much of a random and unexplained fashion as he arrived, only this time he inadvertently brings Hitomi along with him. As they return to the kingdom of Fenalia, they are immediately attacked by Zybok's invisible Gaimelith fortress led by Dillendow, aka Joffrey Baratheon.
Go on and try, Alan! Please do!
Kill him! Kill all of them, I command it!
I haven't done any dragon hunting in such a long time. This ought to be very entertaining!
I'm telling Mother, you can't.
Joffrey over here is a one-dimensional villain who just wants to watch the world burn, and he does a good job of making you hate him because he's a bratty sadist and is totally annoying. During the invasion of Fenalia, Vaughn is told to retreat with the Escaflowne, but having his kingdom burned to the ground in less than one day of him becoming its ruler is not good for his resume, so to save face and secure future job opportunities, Vaughn decides to throw caution to the wind and defend his people. The only problem is that he's outnumbered by trained invisible soldiers inside giant suits of armor with weapons made out of a non-Newtonian metal which can be formed to their will. The fight itself is actually very enjoyable because you don't know what's going to happen, because while Vaughn is skilled with a sword, he doesn't have experience with the Escaflowne, and one of the most enjoyable parts of the anime happens right here when Vaughn's teacher Balgus, a battle-hardened warrior who fights against Zybok Melis without armor, he does so using a giant sword that's probably intended for Gaimelith use, and even manages to block attacks with it. This guy is a total badass. As this fight comes to an end with Vaughn on the losing end, he and Hitomi are again mysteriously teleported away to safety. That's right, Deus Ex Machina already in effect, and it's only episode 2. Unfortunately, this isn't the last time we'll see random divine intervention. Sadly, Escaflowne is plagued by 3 major problems associated with its story, and 1 major problem associated with its production that'll keep it from being top-shelf material, because I do stand by what's here and saying that there is potential with this anime. The first problem related to the story is having Hitomi be an earthling transported away into a fantasy world. It adds an extra level of needless complexity in hopes of creating some level of relatability with its main character here. But just because the show is a fantasy doesn't mean that its characters will be unrelatable unless they're a teenager from Earth or in a Japanese school. I don't see why they didn't just make her a villager of some neighboring kingdom, or possibly a farmer of Finalia whose psychic abilities draw her out to a specific spot where the dragon fight goes down, and her using her abilities to save Vaughn's life, just as they did in the original anime here. The positives created by Gaia being an alternate realm of Earth where people can teleport back and forth from are far outweighed by its negatives. The positives are that anybody who just loves to eat up school-centric anime may find it more relatable and possibly easier accessible, and it also creates additional mysteries pertaining to the world of Gaia and the mysterious land of Atlantis, as well as potential Easter eggs surrounding the Emperor Dorne character. Now, the problem that this creates is that the story revolves around the ability to change fate, which either creates false suspense as characters get thrown into impossible situations only to have the correct path be given to them via psychic abilities, or to have them teleported away in just the most opportune moment here, or even having the odds placed so far against them that the only way that they can succeed is by having plot twists at breakneck speeds. After our early onset case of Deus Ex Machina, we find that our heroes are separated in their neighboring kingdom of Asturia, where they encounter Alan Shazar, a typical shoujo playboy who's also a high-ranking knight for the kingdom of Asturia. Jokes aside, I actually enjoyed his character more than both Vaughn and Hitomi combined. He's well-rounded and mentally sound. Now, while Alan also had the expert training of Balgus, he's also more experienced in combat, but he doesn't have a magical Gaimelith with untold abilities that can transform into a dragon or randomly get teleported away. His personal life is also complicated, as he is in love with Malerna, who is also an interesting character, as she is the princess of Asturia who dreams of becoming a doctor but is forced to put all of the training aside so that she can retain her duties as princess, meaning just sitting around in really expensive dresses paid for with tax money and doing nothing. So she is actually in love with Alan as well, but it's not meant to be because he isn't royalty and her father has already given her away to one of the richest Asturian merchants by the name of Dryden. While I may have my complaints about the story's premise, there's actually a lot going on here in terms of its world. On the ground level, it's a massive world filled with many kingdoms, and each kingdom has their own history and ancient mysteries that do get uncovered within the anime series. There's also social structures within each of the kingdoms, which is why Alan is ineligible to marry Malerna. Escaflowne also has a political level to the story as well. The nation of Zybok was also defeated by kingdoms on all sides, and once treaties were signed, peace was achieved. During peacetime, Zybok became a massive industrial empire that is also the technological capital of the world for reasons that I'll explain later in this review. Due to the fact that they have the most advanced technology, they can create things that nobody else has, such as Gaimeliths, with invisible cloaks of them, so that they can actually use this invisible feature that they have to sneak around in neighboring kingdoms and attack them without breaking any of the treaties, because there's no evidence there because they're totally invisible. When they're exposed for having destroyed the kingdom of Finalia, Asturia imposes economic sanctions against Zybok, which they're allowed to do because they are the merchant capital of Gaia. The only problem is that Emperor Dorne doesn't care and will keep trying to destroy everybody. Does that sound familiar? In addition to this, with Zybok's underhanded methods and their technological advancements, they are capable of buying people off, and you never know who has an ulterior motive here when it comes to Hitomi or the coveted Escaflowne. Speaking of the Zybok Empire, our villains are basically just a mixed bag here. Yes, we do have little Joffrey, a one-trick pony who's a total eyesore, but we also have Vulcan, Vaughn's older brother, who was supposed to become the king of Finalia, but abandoned his kingdom after being unable to complete the rite of passage by defeating the dragon. By far, Vulcan is the most interesting villain because he makes you wonder about his history because he tries to be ominous yet morally gray antagonist. Lastly, we have Emperor Dorne, who's an old man with mysterious motives. He's basically the puppet master behind it all, and rightfully everything about his character is considered a spoiler. In addition to the military conflict between our heroes and the Zybok, there's also added levels of tension with Vaughn and Vulcan as brothers, and also several love triangles between Vaughn, his catgirl companion Merle, Hitomi, Alan, and also Malerna. I can't say that I was exactly too involved with the romance aspect of the show, but I do appreciate it essentially blurring the lines between shoujo and shonen, and there's a reason for this. Escaflowne was originally intended to be a shonen anime scheduled with 39 episodes and to be directed by Yasuhiro Imagawa, who back then was the director of Giant Robo, the animation. Escaflowne eventually got shelved, and Imagawa went off to direct G Gundam. After 2 years of being on the shelf, production of Escaflowne began again with the new director, Kazuke Akane, who at that time had only directed a soccer movie called Kazu and Yasu. The idea to add shonen elements to the anime was added to widen its appeal, and thankfully these changes were made because I actually went back and tried to read the manga, keyword tried, and I'll say this, Escaflowne is one of the few anime that's better than its manga because everything is different. The character models, the world, the story, everything, the manga felt totally uninspired, and the setting was bland instead of being the sprawling world of beauty that the anime made it. The Gaimelis were generic-looking robots, whereas the anime made them look like primitive iron structures driven by hydraulic pressure and potentially better technology depending on which kingdom the Gaimelis came from. The character models look totally different as well, much more crude, and the anime refined the style. Yes, all the men became bi-shonen, which is basically with the exception of Balgus here, but it's still a nicer design nonetheless. The biggest draw was the story. Here Hitomi falls into another world as her spirit is pulled out of a crystal, and she will be used as the power source for the Escaflowne instead of the heart of a dragon. The only catch is that she takes damage as the Escaflowne takes damage. This was thankfully rectified in the anime, where Vaughn makes a blood pact with the Dragonheart and the Escaflowne, beginning to take on damage as the battles get more intense as the anime continues. But in the manga, having a girl who is just acting like a punching bag, and she can't even control the outcome of the fight because she has no control over the Escaflowne there, it was just dumb, and I quit reading it. I mean, could you imagine if every time Goku got into a battle, he would drag Chi-Chi along with him, and he would just toss her in front of Frieza's attack like a shield? I mean, Chi-Chi is very annoying, but nobody wants to watch that. Despite its flaws, the anime of Escaflowne was a massive improvement over the manga, but that doesn't excuse it from the problem that it has. This next section of the review will contain spoilers, and if you don't want to be spoiled, then skip to this time right here. As I said, Escaflowne has 3 major flaws with the story and 1 with its production. Earlier when I mentioned the problem associated with Hitomi's power allowing her to see the future, that was only half of the problem. The truth is that the lost land of Atlantis was inhabited by humans called Atlanteans. They were expert engineers and technologically advanced in ways that nobody in Gaia had ever seen. They eventually created a machine called the Atlantis machine, which allowed them to convert thoughts into reality, essentially changing the destiny of others and their self at will. The power eventually went to their heads, and they used this machine to lengthen their lifespan and give themselves wings. From this point on, they were known as the Draconians, who used the machine in ways that inadvertently led to the destruction of the island of Atlantis. Descendants of the Draconians still live on within the story with Vaughn and Vulcan, and the rare humans who are capable of entering the world of Gaia also had a slight degree of these abilities too, because that's where they all came from anyways. And now you're probably asking, why is this so much of a bad thing? Because it does sound awesome, and I admit, it really does. But due to the fact that the anime was cut back from 39 39 episodes to 26 episodes from lack of funding, they weren't capable of totally delving into these issues and expanding upon them. What we got in the end was Emperor Dorne Kirk using Vulcan to change not only destiny, but the fabric of reality itself. He was capable of using this machine to make Alan fall in love with Hitomi, which would create a rift between her and Vaughn, preventing him from reaching his true potential as a Draconian, the only living Draconian that isn't already a pawn of Dorne Cook. Oh yeah, and he also uses powers to take characters like Dylan Dow and give him a sex change. That's right, Dylan Dow, aka little Joffrey Baratheon over here, was originally born as a girl. But Dorne Kirk here, who by the way is likely Isaac Newton, who found a way to teleport over to Gaia a long time ago, decided to change her into a boy. For what? He's a disobedient psychopath who destroys everything. Clearly you'd think if this is a machine that could alter the fabric of reality, you would think of something better, or at least wish yourself a brain that's capable of coming up with something better than this. Trust me, it goes even further than this. When Dorne Kirk creates a special type of blood that embodies the pure essence of luck, but only a select few with the right body types won't reject the blood. But of course that didn't stop him from making experiments on people anyways. So what does this lucky golden blood actually do, you might ask? Take a look at this. I don't think there's a good way for a villain to use a destiny-altering machine, because in these situations you're basically left with either one or two scenarios. You either have a villain who seems stupid for not wishing the right things into existence, or you have to rely on Deus Ex Machina to level out the playing field for our heroes. The ending, or honestly the last third of the anime, was a total mess, and if it had taken longer and spaced things out, then yeah, I could see it, because they could put more time into developing these plot points here, but some of the things are just hard to get my head around, like when Vulcan randomly changes sides, or the drama that started when Dorne Kirk forced Alan to fall in love with Hitomi. You can't give a villain the ability to write their own story because it's not going to end well. Speaking of not ending well, it's obvious at this point that Vaughn and Hitomi are aware of their love for each other, but instead of forming a life together in this beautiful world where Hitomi can willfully travel back and forth between Earth and Gaia, which is another problem the story doesn't actually deal with him, what they do is they actually split up and go their own separate ways while vowing to still love each other, which is total bullshit. You know what I'd like to see? An anime set 15 years in the future after the ending of Escaflowne, where she's married, so I can sit here, look her in the face, and laugh at her for marrying some paper pusher in an office because she walked away from a guy who literally slays dragons and flies around his planet with a suit of armor powered by the heart of a dragon. So there you have it. The main problems are 1, the Spirited Away trope, not because it's a trope, but because it doesn't work and needlessly complicates things for this particular story. 2, the one-dimensional Dylan Dow being the primary villain who's totally annoying and leaving other more interesting villains like Vulcan and Dorne Kirk to be the players behind the scenes for the most part. And 3, just about everything to do with the last third of the show. And as far as the production issue, this was cut down from 39 to 26 episodes, so maybe some of the problem that I had with the ending would have been rectified if they had had more time. Moving on to the presentation, Escaflowne is truly beautiful on numerous levels. The way it depicts both Earth and the numerous kingdoms of Gaia, as well as its natural environment. The kingdoms of Gaia are actually modeled after real-world places. Phonalia was modeled after Meiji-era Japan, Asturia was modeled after Venice, Italy, and the kingdoms of Frade was a mixture of Thailand and Cambodia. In addition to their attention to detail with the environment, the character models are also on point. You can probably tell from the clips here, but they did a good job of expressing the character's emotion through the facial expressions and also the body language. Lots of attention to detail was also given to the Gaimelis. The Escaflowne is an ancient piece of technology, so rightfully its exterior looks raw and rough and aged, and there's really no polished metal or chrome coating to be found here. The same goes for the other Gaimelis, such as Alan's, but the difference is that his is not an ancient piece of tech. It's probably something something that is standard issue for all of Alan's peers as the higher ranking knights of Asturia here, and the Zybok Gamellus are actually the most refined because the Zybok Empire is actually the technological leader of the world and has the ability to mass produce them. My favorite is, of course, the Escaflowne. That's probably a no-brainer. It's totally awesome. In terms of animation, the vision of Escaflowne is at the top of its class, literally. This aired in 1996, but if you remember shows like Gundam Wing, which was arguably the most popular 90s mecha anime, the animation was filled with reused footage and the Gundams just felt weightless there. One thing that I really love that they did with the anime here is that when you had a character that gets inside of his Gamellus, you'll have all of these pieces that contort to fit his body, all these like sleeves coming down over his arm so that his moves will transfer directly to the Gamellus, whether it be the Escaflowne or otherwise, and you see all these wires and stuff on the inside. It looks really good. They definitely did pay a lot of attention to this. Now, as far as the remaster goes, I think they did a great job of preserving picture quality, color, and aspect ratio, so I commend them on that. Moving on to the audio, the background music is simply amazing. It feels like you have a whole orchestra that's playing while people in giant suits of armor are walking around, crashing everything, wrecking everything around them while they're in these massive battles. Honestly, I feel like the music really helps the anime escalate to a higher level here, and it's one of the rare fantasy anime that give you this experience that you're watching a totally unique world with its own living civilization and history, and I think the music definitely attributes to this. The soundtrack was created by Yoko Kanno, who also worked on Cowboy Bebop, which also is known for having an amazing soundtrack for itself. As far as the voice acting goes, Escaflowne has 2 English dubs, the 2000 Bandai dub and the 2016 Funimation dub, which is a part of the Kickstarter. While I didn't go through and compare them word for word, I think they both sound fine, but of course the Funimation dub is going to be the winner here. It has better sound quality, and also the voice actors I think did a better job. Moving on to my final thoughts, if you're curious about Escaflowne and feel like the anime series is not the best way to go about it, and you want to read the manga, don't. That's all I've got to say about that. This is actually one of the rare instances where the anime is far superior to the manga that came out before it, and there were later manga adaptations of the anime, but they just try and squeeze the story down, and I don't think that they're worth reading either. As for the Escaflowne movie, it looks absolutely beautiful, even better than the anime, but the story is actually very bad there. It tries to take the series, which is already shorter than it needed to be, and cram it down into the length of a movie by reimagining it, and I just wish that Escaflowne went the way of Neon Genesis Evangelion or even Space Runaway Ideon, where they knew that they wouldn't be able to finish the story in the allotted time that they had, so they would just have a cliffhanger ending and just have the movie finish off the story there. Either way, Escaflowne is not a perfect anime, but it is still totally worth watching, even if it's just to experience the beautiful animation, the great soundtrack, and also the handcrafted world here. It's really a shame that a few setbacks prevented the story from achieving its great potential, but I don't think that that should stop anyone from watching it. If you've seen Escaflowne, let me know your thoughts about it in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the review, hit that like button and also share it with a friend. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Hit that button already. And lastly, if you'd like to help support the channel, which is about 90% funded by viewer support, check out the Patreon, because every dollar adds up and we've got loads of rewards. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Brady the Undefeated Magician, Marcus, Rob the Durataku, Ben Johnson, and Light Lelouch for their Patreon support, as well as everyone else's support on Patreon for making these videos possible. I'll see you next time with anime news on Monday, followed by my top 10 anime first episodes and a review of Wolf's Rain. I'll see you then.